Hello, ngHouston. We're going to have a great show for you today. I'm very excited. We have Isaac Mann on the show from Narwhal. And it's funny how, I don't know how Narwhal does this, right? But, oh, sorry, I've got to mute myself. We're going to have a great show for you today. I'm very excited. Sorry about that. Normally I have headphones on. So it's crazy because I was following Isaac Mann on Twitter for a while and I just thought he was really cool and had some articles that I really enjoyed. And so I reached out to him and asked him to come on ngHouston and I found out he's actually a pretty cool guy. I think I had reached out and asked you questions or something. I was like, I don't remember, but I just thought you were really great. And then next thing you know, Narwhal hired you. And I was like, of course, because they're hiring all of the cool people. So I think that's great. So you're at Narwhal now and you're on ngHouston and you're gonna teach us some cool stuff about components. I'm super excited about that. First, I want to introduce our panelist and then we're just gonna jump right into your presentation. So John, you wanna say hello? Welcome to ngHouston, John.
Hi, everybody. My name is John Rista and I work at Breebug here in Colorado. I'm a senior software engineer and architect, and most of my days I kind of spend jumping from project to project, helping where I'm needed, writing architectural advice, and lately getting into writing articles and hopping on ngHouston when she needs me to.
I'm very excited to have you here, and just so y'all know, John has been working on something NGRX related that I think is personally really, really cool. So I've been twisting his arm and trying to get him to come on and tell us that. And he's been resisting, but I think I've just about got him. And I think we're going to have John in a couple of weeks showing us some really cool stuff that he's been developing with Jesse Sanders.
Yeah.
So I'm excited about that. But today,
yeah,
I'm looking forward to that. So I'm not going to let you get out of that. But today we have Isaac Mann in the hot seat. So Isaac, why don't you jump right in and take it away and teach us something cool?
Awesome. Well, I am definitely very excited to be working at Narwhal. It's been great to be working with some really cool people. And the other thing that's nice is that I get to work from my home in Columbus, Ohio. I don't have to move to Toronto or Phoenix or any other place for that matter. So this is the great place to start and to work. So I'm going to show you first off the Narwhal Connect site. So this Narwhal Connect was launched just last week at ngConf, and this is the, let's see, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So this is the dashboard for Narwhal Connect, and the price for getting in here is just your email. So all you need to do is go to connect.narwhal.io and give us your email, and then you can get in and you can see all sorts of content that the Narwhal team has put together. You can see books or topics these are collections of resources that on a particular topic, courses about different things. We have live events. There's a live event coming up at the end of May about Basil that Tor and Jeff and Victor are going to be talking with Alex Eagle from the Angular team. But I want to start off with here. There's this cookbook section, which is kind of the idea of this cookbook section is to have concise, very useful and short instructions on how to solve specific problems. And I just want to highlight this particular recipe here. It's talking about choosing between ng content and ng template. And basically, if you get bored by my presentation today, you can get the TLDR of this presentation just from reading this short one-page recipe here. So,
hey, I think Jeff Cross is in the chat. If we could get Jeff Cross to drop that link to that page in the chat, that would be really cool. Jeff Cross, if you're listening, thank you, please.
Okay, so that is Narwhal Connect. And now I'm going to show some information here. Let's see. We're going to go through some design patterns here. There we go. Okay, so basically, when you're setting up your app, pretty much any app of any reasonable size is going to have a set of shared UI components, and there are lots of decisions that you go through as you're making your UI components, and as you're making them, you want to not make unintentional decisions. Every decision you make that you're encapsulating in your component, you want to make that on purpose. And so that's going to be the theme of this presentation. When you have, I'm going to go through 3 different ways of rendering the same HTML on the screen, and we're going to talk about the pros and cons of using those 3 different ways. So the first way, and let me go through a little bit of what this app actually is first. So right now I've got this app here that displays some of the services that Narwhal provides, along with what they cost, and you can select it. And so Narwhal provides consulting. You have to pay money to get consulting. They provide open source software, and you can get the open source for free, but it comes with guilt that you're not actually doing anything. So if you really want to use open source without any guilt on you, then you contribute back by filing issues or creating pull requests and help being a good open source citizen. So you select these, and it shows down here at the bottom what you've selected and what it'll cost you. So this list here is being rendered inside of a single component. It's got input and output of services here. We've got an array of services, and this checkbox at the top and this cost stuff at the bottom is outside the component. So I wired up a little CSS helper here. I click on this. If I click on this checkbox, it'll show me what is inside my shared component and what is in the app component. And this is highlighted with gray, which is kind of I don't know, not a very exciting color. So let me go in and change that color to my favorite color, chartreuse. Here. There we go. That's a little snazzier. So now you see anything when you click on highlight, it highlights anything in here is inside of this provided library component, and I don't really have control over that. That UI is provided to me by the library author, and I can change the inputs and I can react to the outputs, but I can't actually control how this is being rendered. Let's say, so one thing I could do is I could go to the app component. I could add another service here, because Narwhal actually also provides content, educational content. And that actually doesn't cost, you don't have to contribute back for the educational content, but it costs you your attention and your email address, apparently. So there you go. So, but I don't have control over how this is being rendered at all. So say I wanted to add an image to one of these, or add some, so I mean, I can change this string here, but I can't put HTML inside of that string. It's not going to be rendered correctly. If I made this a bold tag, that's just going to render as that text. So there are a couple ways of solving this problem. And the first one we're going to look at is using compound components. So this is going to be semi-live coded and semi just going to pre-created branches. Okay, so let's go back to the app component, HTML, and let's look at what that looks like. So I've commented out the old single component. Now you can see that this looks exactly the same. We still have 3 Narwhal services. We can still select them, and it shows what the cost is. So it's communicating out to the app component. And what I'm using is something called compound components. Why is this scrolling is weird? So I've got an outer component, which is the list component, and list item components that are inside of it. And each list item component has inputs and outputs, and I'm sending data in. I'm sending the consulting service in. I'm sending the open source service in. And if I want to, I can reorder these. It'll change the order. I can remove one, and it'll remove it. But the other thing that you can do with this is you can add. Actually, let me show how this is implemented first, and then I will talk about why this is valuable. Well, okay. Well, here, inside content here. So now you can type in content that goes there, and this can even be the HTML.
And where exactly does that content go?
We're going to go show that. So, I'm going to talk about how the list works and how the list item works. We're going to go through each of them individually here. So we got the list component here. The list component itself, there's not a lot happening inside the component, the TypeScript of it. Pretty much all the interesting stuff that's happening in HTML. So here's our list component, which is the outer layer, and all that has is it has some markup here, and the only special thing is this ngContent tag. The ngContent tag says whatever is inside of this app services list tag, which in this case is all of this stuff here. Angular is going to take whatever's in there and drop it inside of this ngContent tag. And you can see how that's happening like this. Mm-hmm. So I turn on the highlighting. So the app list component, or the services list component, is this outside green area here. And so it's in charge of what's going on there. Now this white area, our app component, is in charge of all the stuff that's in this white area. And then inside here, we've got an app list item, which is in charge of what's going on inside of here. So to contrast with the, so let me show you what the app list, the list component looks like. This one. This one, the list item has a little bit more going on in the TypeScript, but still most of the interesting stuff is happening in the HTML here. So here we've got a label and some default markup, and then it also has an ngContent tag to put the HTML that we put. Let's see. So then this content will be placed in that ngContent. So for this app services list item,
right,
this content gets placed inside of this ngContent right there.
Perfect.
Okay. So let's contrast this with the single component approach. I'm going to uncomment that. Save this. Now I'm going to turn on the highlighting again. So with a single component, all of this UI is locked away from us, and we can't change that at all. But with the compound component, you have control. You can add markup in this white area. And so you can move these green things around, and you can add markup around, or and anything that's in the white area, you can control what's happening there.
So with the content in the white area there, is there any way you can control that based on the state of something like the checkbox for open source? Is that possible?
It is. Whoops. Something weird happened. close that.
It's happening because you're streaming on YouTube, Isaac. That's what
Yes,
happens.
it is. Let me just open up the browser preview again. So reacting to the state that's inside the component. Yes, you can. It's a little bit awkward with ng content, and it will actually be a little bit easier with the next pattern that I show.
All right.
So let's take that segue and actually hold on. Let me show you. Let me show you the final version with the with ng content. Git stash. So this is I've added some images for open source. We've got NX and the Angular console. We got images that I've added in there, and then for content, I added in an HTML link just here in the content. So it's the same thing that I already showed you, but it's just showing you an example of what you might want to do if a particular item is custom and special, and you want to do something with it. You can do that with a compound component pattern with ng content.
Gotcha.
Okay, so ng content is really best used when you have when each item is unique and you're wanting to put in markup for each individual item. Whereas this next pattern, which is using ng template, works better when you have just like an array of items, and you might have different types of items, but they're not all unique and special. They can fall into categories basically. So let me show you how the ng template works. So this one, I've replaced so right now it looks a lot like the single component. You've got app services list with templates, and you've got an input and output, and you can select and unselect. And I click the highlight, and it looks like this is all of the CUI here is coming from the component itself. Okay, so how is this different? Well, let's look inside of this app services list component. Okay, so now, the ng template strategy is a little bit more complicated than ng content.
Okay. Isaac, you might want to shrink the size of your browser there because the code's a little cramped.
Yeah, good idea. Thank you.
There you go. Perfect.
So ng templates are a little bit more complicated than ng content because you have to somehow pass in this template. And actually, let me show you what that looks like first. Let me actually pass in a template, and then we'll. So let's say we wanted to control what the layout of this UI component was. I can write a template here and give it a name and pass in this custom layout template as an input here. And now my app services list with templates component will use that custom layout template. And so you can see here, my text that I put in here in the template has replaced what was already in there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's not incredibly useful right now. So let's talk about let's go through how you can actually provide data in your templates, and then and then we'll go through setting up a whole ng template there. So here in the services list template, I have 2 inputs here. I've got a layout template and a service template. And those will correspond to 2 different places where you can control the UI of this component here. Okay, so let's look at the HTML. So this is a template here. Let me collapse this template, and we'll collapse this template. Okay. So on the surface, all we have is an ng container, which doesn't render anything. And then it uses, if the layout template is defined, is provided from the outside, it'll use that. Otherwise, it uses this default template, which is defined down here. So this default template has our Narwhal services header. It's got the unordered list and list items. And then it has another container here, which renders another template, which if it's passed in as an input, it'll use that input. Otherwise, it uses the default service template, which is down here. And then that one, my mouse scroll wheel is having lots of issues. I will just use the keyboard now. And then this item template shows the label and an input and a checkbox, just like we were doing before.
Right.
So let me copy this template here, and I'll use this in my app component to overwrite how it's being rendered. Okay, so we call this custom template. Layout template, custom template. Okay, so let's see if that worked. All right, so now we have, now if I highlight this again, well, my highlighting is not working correctly, but I bet if I did this, it would. There we go. Okay, now you can see that the library template, component does not actually control any of the UI. It doesn't provide any of the UI here. It's all being defined right here, as we can see in our app component.
Right.
So we can put whatever markup we want in here, and this let services equal services is how we get the data from the library component and then display it in whatever way we want to display it. So another way we could do that is if we don't want to do the layout component, we could do just the service template here.
Mm-hmm.
And then that would my CSS highlighting is kind of a hack, but
yeah,
you can see here that these items are being provided by the app, but the outside shell is being provided by the library itself.
So you can kind of break down how much control you have by how you template your component and expose those templates.
Exactly. Whereas, so with ng content, you have less control over over how you are, how much UI you're providing to giving access to the consumers of your components.
Right. So just for clarity, how exactly do you kind of configure let dash service? How do you make that happen?
Let's go into that. Okay, so this is being controlled by this this directive here. Okay, well there's the ngTemplate outlet directive has an input of ngTemplate outlet context.
Okay.
And so you get, this is all the data that is being provided to this template up here. So this template can do let services equal, so let's do this here. So this, this service keyword here is what's being defined here.
Inside your individual.
Okay, so that has to match that. If I change that to service 2, I have to change this to service 2. And if I save that, it'll still work. But this string here is local to whatever's inside of this ngTemplate. So this could be service named
you're
whatever
variable. It's just a template style.
Correct. Yep.
Right.
So and now that will still work. So you can name this if you have naming collisions based on what's around here. So if service is already defined somewhere in this component,
right, you
can call it something else if you want to call it something else. Gotcha. So that there's no confusion as to what thing you're talking about. Yes. So one of the benefits of this ngTemplate approach is that you can totally change the UI. So say I don't like using a plain HTML unordered list. Say I can use a material list, Angular material list. So let me pull in my code for that. And I mean, you don't need to, some of this is just boilerplate material stuff, but so I've got a service list template here in the app component, and I'm providing the selection list, and then I'm doing an ng4 over each of the services and having a list option. And then I've got another template that I'm using for the individual items. But most of what looks semi-complex here is just the material design, but material markup. But this works just as well, and it's using the same component. And if I highlight here, you can see that the material list is white because it's provided by the app component, and then there's just this green around the outside to show that there's the library component is there. It's providing data to my templates, but it's not actually controlling the UI at all.
Right.
So let's see. Now let me uncomment this code up here. And let's talk a little bit about how each of these 3 patterns compares with each other. And let me make this a little bigger here. So with your single component, that gives the consumer of your UI component the least amount of flexibility. And this single component approach is best used when you really want to lock down what something looks like. If you have a specific button that's branded the way you want it to be branded, and you don't want anybody to be able to change the way it's branded except the library authors, then maybe a single component is probably what you want to do. And you're intentionally making the choice to say, no, you cannot control the UI. I, the library author, am in charge of the UI. But if you're distributing this library for use by other people, especially outside of your company and like an open source library, that is probably not the choice that you want, because everybody's going to have their own styles and things that they want to do. Compound components are great. They give you more flexibility with the UI, and you can even do as a library author, you can control less of the UI if you want, by using a directive here instead of a component, and then people can apply that directive onto whatever markup they want, and you don't have to control the UI for that. But basically, compound component with ng content, the default is controlling the UI, and you kind of have to move away from that. Whereas with ng template, the default is do whatever you want, and then you have to move back the other direction. So with ng template, it's good to provide a default template if they don't have one, and so that somebody has at least something. And also the default template serves another purpose, is it gives people something to copy and paste to start from. Because when you saw when I did the layout template, I just went into the component code, copied out the default template, and that way I knew what all the data that was available to me, and I could say, okay, well, it looks like we're going to iterate over these things, and I just want to change this part over here, so I'll just change that piece, and I have control over everything, but I have a nice starter kit. Yeah.
So I actually have one more question for you.
Sure.
I noticed for your ng template component, you were interacting with a service call. It was highlighted that it wasn't functioning properly, but it seemed to work. So I'm kind of curious what the call was and how that works.
Yep. Let me look at that. So this is an issue with the Angular language service, which has been there for a long time.
Gotcha.
And I don't know if it'll ever get fixed, but basically, so this service changed is a function that comes in from, let's see, service checked is passed in. So okay, let me back up.
Okay.
So for templates, kind of like components, you can do inputs and outputs in templates, but they're being used and they're being passed in the same way. So for an input, you just pass in the raw object, but for an output, you have to pass in a function.
Right. Gotcha.
And then, but the typing, the Angular language service treats everything that comes in as an object, basically.
Right.
And it doesn't think anything is a function. It doesn't think it can be called, even though this one we know that it can.
Gotcha.
So there are a few ways around it. I think you can do .apply. That ignores the typing concern, or you can just leave it there and ignore it.
Okay. Well, I mean, the main question was, how do you deal with outputs on a template? And that pretty much that question is.
Well, there's another gotcha that you have to watch out for, because you have to watch out for the this binding. So I have service checked as an error function here, and that's important because I'm using this inside of the function.
Right.
If this was if I made this be a normal member function,
right,
this would not refer to what I'm expecting it to refer to. Gotcha. So you have to make sure that this is it's applied correctly.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I think those are the main gotchas. Now, if you want, we could try making a structural directive.
Sure.
I didn't prepare for that, but I think we could do it.
Let's go for it.
Okay, so let's see. So the reason you might do that is, okay, so say we've got these templates here, and we're giving them a name, and then we're passing in as an input up here. But that's a little bit awkward. It might be nicer if you could take this template and just put it inside here and have it pick up on the fact that it's there. So let's see. So we've got this ng template here, and we're naming it that way. So let's take that off of here, and we'll take off that name. And let's see, what else do we need to do? ng template, and let's go. So let's go into this app services list with templates, and tell it to look inside of okay. So I think that should work. Okay. So what I did is you can label the same member property with 2 different decorators if you want.
Right.
And so now layout template will be, you can pass it in as an input, or it'll look for it as a content child.
Gotcha.
And I look for it, I said basically look inside of the content for anything that's a template ref and use that. And so inside of here, we've got one ng template, and it's finding it and it's using it like that. That's great, but maybe that template is, you might have more than one template inside the content. So, oops. I'm gonna have to reopen the browser preview again, but that's fine. So maybe we want to look for it by something else. So let's make here we go. Let me pull up the Angular console here, because this is what I use for everything now. I'm gonna make a directive that I'm gonna use to label my template. So we'll call it layout template. Generate that. And layout template directive. Okay. And so what we're going to do is we're going to put this layout template directive on the template ref. Actually, and I'm going to make this public just to make it easier. Okay, and that should be enough. Now,
I just have to tell you while you're doing this, Isaac, how impressed I am with you that you've been doing all this coding living on YouTube and have not had a single meltdown, because it's so easy. Like, even sometimes you know exactly what you're doing, but you're live streaming, it's hard, right? And you're just flying through this like it's nothing.
Phenomenal.
Well, up until now, I've had Git branches that I could always fall back to. Now I don't have a safety net anymore, so we'll see how well it goes.
We're very impressed with you. You look cool as a cucumber.
Okay, good. Let's see. So now I need to take that. What's that directive selector? Here it is. App layout template. So now we're going to put that directive onto the ng template itself. And now, hopefully, this app services list template will be able to find that. Let's see, did it find it? No, Visual Studio Code. I don't want your home page. No, it did not find it.
Do you need to provide it somewhere or anything like that?
But should pick that up. App layout template directive. It's declared there. That's good. And app layout template. Put that on here. Pull that in. Layout template directive. Making sure I saved everything. Okay, well, I'm not sure what it's getting stuck on here, so I'm going to skip this step and go straight to this. So let's just pretend that worked. What would be even nicer than doing it this way is if we could have this itself, because this component here doesn't actually have any UI associated with it. All it is the ng container, and just to render it. So with this ng container logic here, you could do that in TypeScript using the view container ref and just applying it. And this is the part where I'm going to have to cheat and look up the docs here. Structural directive. There we go. Container ref create. There we go. That's it. Okay, so I'm going to go here, rewrite this as a directive, get rid of that template URL, and no style URLs. Okay, and I will make this be a attribute selector instead. And instead of using content child for the layout template, I'm going to have that be passed in through the constructor here. Actually, let me just copy this code because this is the same as the Angular IO example here. Okay, we've got a template ref. So in our case, this template ref is the layout template. And then in the on init, we're going to take the.
Real quick, you might want to collapse your Explorer.
Yeah, let's do that.
There you go.
Let's take this view container, this dot view container dot create embedded view, and this dot layout template, and we need to give it a context. What is the context here? This is our context here.
Amazing the broad range of ways you can solve the same problem.
Yeah, there are lots of different ways you can do it. And it's really, what I'm doing now to make it a structural directive is really, it doesn't really gain you a whole lot. The syntax might look a little bit nicer,
right.
But it doesn't actually, everything that was possible before will still be possible now, and everything there's nothing extra that you gain in terms of functionality by doing this. I'm just trying to see if I can do it.
Rise to the challenge.
Yeah. Okay, so we're rendering that and saving this. Let's see. Let me comment this stuff out. Okay, now this is not working because we've changed our selector to make this be a attribute selector instead of a component, making it an attribute directive.
Right.
So we're going to make this a div like that. And now instead of putting it on like that, we're going to call this a structural directive, and let services hold on, how do you do that? ng4. How do you pass an input to a structural directive? That is my question.
The structural directives.
Services. I need to pass in this service. Oh, there we go. Okay. So I can do this.
Right. Now, for any other parameters, you would have to pass them in explicitly?
Yes, you would have to pass them in explicitly, and I forget the exact syntax for doing that right now.
Yeah. I think you may just have to pass them in normally with standard binding syntax, from what I can see here.
Make this, give this a div now, and get rid of this template. Now let's see. This needs to be spelled correctly, and all directives are listed. Now we're in the tedious fixing little bugs phase. Hey, it worked.
Perfect.
Okay, so now this is a structural directive. You don't see, now I'm not using an ng template at all. The ng template tag is not visible, but it's actually still there. That's what this star means.
Right.
The star means that there's an ng template.
Applied. Yeah.
Yeah. So let me see what's the destructured version of this is. So generally with the provided Angular structural directives, you really want to do the star ngF syntax, but with your own provided things, I kind of like having an explicit ng template where you can actually see it and you know what's happening,
right?
Because this kind of feels a little bit magic-y.
It does. There's a little more magic there. It does look prettier, but
right,
a bit more magic there.
Right, it looks prettier, and yeah.
I'm laughing here, Isaac, because Zach is in the YouTube chat, and he's like sent you a Stack Overflow page with the structural directives with multiple inputs.
Okay.
Like Isaac is not watching the chat right now, but I love that you have his back at all times. But this is right. I mean, this is what you wanted to look. It's hard to do it on YouTube.
Yes.
This is what I love about ngHouston, because we're super chill on ngHouston. And it actually, it's like on one hand, when you're presenting, it's like you really feel like you need to be perfect. But for all of the people watching, like we go through this every day. So when you put all the code together, it doesn't always really work exactly the way you want it to. And you kind of have to fiddle with it a little bit, which is, I mean, this is normal. But when you're on YouTube, it's like, oh my goodness, it's hard to do that on YouTube. But it's really great for everybody to see that, like, even you big experts, because it's, it's like we look up to you guys. But then when we see, and like Jeff Cross was on one time, and he was like, it's not working. It's so nice for the rest of us to see that, even the heroes can, get a console error sometimes. It's nice.
Yeah, it is nice. So that's the end of my presentation. I want to talk a little bit more about Connect. Let me change what
Before
I'm
you dive into
sharing.
that, I guess there's one point that could be made about structural directives. If you do create your own, that would preclude the use of ngFor or something like that if you needed to use it.
Right. So you can't do an ngFor on here.
Right.
Because you can't do more than one. You'd have to wrap it in an ng container.
Right. Whereas your ng template approach, you should be able to still use ngFor on your app services list with templates.
That's right. Yep.
Right.
And I think a lot of people, like I worked with Angular for a long time before I realized that I could make my own structural directive. Like you have the ngFor and ngIf and that kind of thing that comes out of the box, but you can make your own, which I think is something, but it's kind of like RxJS, like you learn your first few operators and there's quite a bit that you can do before you go on and start, having more advanced stuff. And I think this is the same way.
Right. So structural directives are kind of fun to play with. I don't think there's a lot of use to them, to making your own.
Right.
What I really like, I like the ng templates and I like the compound components.
Yeah.
So let me go back to, let me stats what I've got here.
It's like playing with DNA and cloning sheep. Sometimes just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Right. So if you get one thing out of this presentation, it's be careful about the decisions that you're making, and only make as few decisions for your users as you can. If you're providing a lib for people to use lots of places, be as agnostic as possible in your UI and in all your other choices too. So don't force people into things, because then they're going to end up not using your component, your library, because it doesn't fit their exact use case. And it's wonderful. I have a couple UI libraries that use ng template, and it's great to get issues where people say, I can't do this exact thing. I'm like, well, yeah, you can. Just just overwrite this and do whatever you feel like doing. And so it lets people do whatever they need to do, and it relieves the burden from you as a maintainer to have to handle all the different possible UI libraries and say, can you write a bootstrap version of this?
Right.
And actually I need to have some ARIA labels on this on this button. And like, okay, do it. That's fine.
I love this. Thank you so much, Isaac, for coming on and showing us. I really appreciate how much content you're putting out. I love just people who are teaching Angular in the community. And really, I especially love the people who are teaching Angular in a way that's easy to follow. Because some of the Angular gets a little complex sometimes. And so it's powerful, but it's a little complicated sometimes, and it's confusing. And so when I find people who really can take this and break it down into a way that's so easy to digest, I really get excited, and I really appreciate you coming on and teaching us cool things.
Yeah.
And I hope you'll come back soon and often. So if they want to follow you on Twitter, you're not Isaac Mann on Twitter. You're actually Mann Isaac.
That's correct. Yeah.
And
so I'm Mann Isaac. And if you want to do something on Twitter, you could tweet at. So here's the Narwhal Connect site that I was talking about. Mm-hmm. So it has a bulleted list of things why you would choose ng content or ng template, and some quick how to use each one. So this is a little recipe I wrote. But we have so we started putting content on this site about a month and a half ago, and we're still working on adding more. And if you would like, so right now there's a support product that our clients, our companies can sign up for, where you can have direct access to us and send us a Slack message and things like that.
Oh,
so
yeah,
individuals can't sign up for that support. But what you can do, if you really want to have your question answered, you could tweet at Narwhal Connect, just like this. Please answer my question, and we might write up a cookbook recipe saying, how do I
Isaac, can we ask
inputs
about Jeff Cross's beard?
Wait, what about Jeff Cross's beard?
No, this is a good question too. This is actually a legit question.
To a structural directive.
That's actually a professional question.
There you go. Yeah. So anyway, so you can tweet something like that, and we'll add it to our list of things that we might write up some recipes about, and then we'll try to tweet back at you saying when it's there.
Just you're sharing your screen, and I'm like, I want you to click on. So like, I want you to go ahead and click on that one because it's really cool. I'm gonna go check those out. I'm very excited about that. I'm very excited to have you on the show. I really hope you come back on the show because this was a great demo. I really appreciate this. And also next week, I'm excited because we have another Narwhal person coming back. We have Jason Jean next week coming to show us the latest NX stuff, which we've had NX. I think we had an intro to NX with Justin a while back on our archives, but he's going to come back and show us like the latest with NX. So that's pretty cool.
That's great.
We also have, what else do we have coming up? We have, there was something else. Oh, Niall Crosby, I think from AG Grid is going to be on the following week, which I'm excited about. And the week after that, we have John Rista with Breebug, who's actually going to come on and teach us some really cool stuff that he's been working on. So we have a really good lineup for this month. I'm very excited.
Great.
Isaac, thank you again so much. You killed it. You did a great job. I really appreciate you showing us that demo, and I hope you'll come back soon and often.
Awesome. Yeah, I'd love to.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week.
All right. Bye.